Let me also add to the welcome that's already been extended this evening. We certainly do appreciate you being here. We do have those that are visiting with us, and we want you to know how much we appreciate you being here. Encourage you to come back and be with us any and every opportunity that you might have. That's what you call stuck. That's stuck. About 2 years ago, I had a little Toyota pickup truck. My son believes that it's daddy's toy, so you drive that thing and put it in situations that look just about like that. And I was down on a lower pond fishing, and Madison's dad happened to be with us, and I heard my pickup truck I'm telling you, they had it wound up. You could hear it all over that valley. And after about 30 minutes, they came out. Now, my truck is black, but my truck looked like that. I stopped it in the middle of a creek and got out and tried to get a bucket and throw water on it and just get the mud off so that I could see how to get home. Now, I'm not so much talking about being stuck in the mud as I am using the phrase stuck in the mud as being in a rut. I want you to take your Bibles and turn to the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 3. Revelation chapter 3, and in particular, I'm going to look at verse 1 where it talks about, "Unto the angel of the church of Sardis write, These things saith he that hath 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know thy works, that thou hast a name, that thou livest and art dead." Do you ever get the impression, or do you ever look at yourself in the mirror as a Christian and think, I'm stuck in a rut? I'm not really doing anything. You know, I'm basically going through the motions. And the reason I ask that question is because a lot of churches throughout the years have asked themselves this question about being in a rut, and they've sought solutions. How do we solve this problem? There's no doubt, you can look at the 7 churches of Asia Minor, and you'll see that each and every one of them, with the exception of maybe one, had problems, had issues that they needed to deal with. They were stuck in a rut. Now, we come along today and we start asking this question, how do you deal with that? And the first thing that a lot of folks want to do is abandon the truth. They want to abandon the truth. We are told to preach the word, to be instant in season and out of season. We are told in John 17 and verse 17 to sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. But yet many folks feel like that they can abandon the truth. And there's no way that I can cover every doctrine that's found in God's inspired word. But you can just look at doctrines in relationship to worship. What has man done when it comes to singing? Ephesians 5:19, speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to your heart to the Lord. What has man done? Well, man comes along and it's like a statement that Rubel Shelley made many, many years ago now. Rubel was leaving the faith, and at that point in time, he wrote a book. And in this book, he said, "My children will not grow up in this tired, boring, lifeless church." Well, let me tell you something. If the church is tired, boring, and lifeless, it's not God's fault. It's not the truth's fault. So if it's not God's fault and it's not the truth's fault, then where do you think the problem lies? The problem lies somewhere with us. The problem lies with the fact of, Matthew 5 and verse 6, blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness. Are you really hungering and thirsting after worshiping God? I mean, is it like a punishment if you didn't get to be here, if you didn't get to worship God, if this wasn't a part of your life, would there be a hole? Would it be something empty in your life? We need to hunger after this. It shouldn't be a chore to go to church. But unfortunately, to some it is. It's a chore to even sit here. I look out over the audience. I see folks, especially when I'm sitting up here, I see folks who are very capable of picking up a book and singing, and they never open their mouth. Never. Do you think you're pleasing God? Can we just abandon the principle, the truth that God has established, and that's going to make us get out of this rut? Then there are those who want to compete with denominations. I don't know who said this. I heard it at Polishing the Pulpit, I think is where I heard it. But the preacher who was preaching said, if we're going to try to compete with all the gimmicks and all the gadgets and all the parties and all the celebrations and all the this and all the that's that all the denominations participate in, we'll never be able to compete with the denominations. And he's so right. He is so right. I hate, I guess I hate, I really don't know if there's a way to determine how I feel, but that big Catholic church building somewhere in Rome or something burnt the other day, and it's built in the 8th century and all that kind of stuff. I know it has some historical significance, and I know it had a great value, and all of those type of things. I realize that. And I realize to the Catholic Church how much a shrine it was. But do you know what? 24 hours had not passed, and they were already nearing $1 billion that were going to be contributed to rebuild that structure. Now, folks, either we don't have it or we're sitting on it and not going to turn it loose. Now, I don't know what the case might be. But when it comes to money, when it comes to structures, when it comes to many different things, we will never, ever, ever be able to compete with the denominations. We can't throw bigger bashes for our young folks than they'll throw. They'll throw bigger bashes. They'll have bigger parties. They got grander schemes. If our kids can go to Gatlinburg, they're going to carry their kids to California to Disney World. I'm telling you, we can't compete. That's not what's going to make the church grow. That's not what's going to make the church viable. That's not what's going to make the church alive. And then there are those who think, well, let's compromise. And what happens? Well, in the turn of the 19th century, we see where some felt like that a great compromise would have been bringing in instruments of music. Well, guess what? About another 100 years, and that idea has been spawned again, bringing in instruments of music. And well, let's don't bring in instruments of music. Let's just use our voices to make sounds of instruments. And let's not have traditional ceremonies anymore. Let's have these new and exciting, relevant services. So you have the traditional versus the new. And some folks say, well, I tell you what we'll do. We'll just please everybody. If you want to come to the traditional service, it'll be at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. If you want to come to the contemporary service, it's going to be at 11 o'clock. And if you just want to come to the abbreviated service, we'll make that at 12:30. And it'll only be 30 minutes long. And if that's not good enough for you, we'll find something that you like. And all the time, the truth is being compromised. Well, the question remains, how, if we're in a rut, how do we get out of a rut? You know, my computer makes mistakes all the time like that. That's the last point. We'll get to that in a minute. How do you get out of this rut? Point number one, we got to change the mindset, not the message. We've got to change our mindset, not the message. You know what the mindset of the world is? The biggest is the best. We want churches that are going to be 10,000 strong. Let me tell you something. I'd love to preach the truth, and I'd love the truth to be sound and solid for a congregation of 10,000. But realistically, that's not what it's going to be. Now, you go back to Matthew chapter 6, and you see the wide way, the broad way that leadeth unto destruction, and many there be which go in thereat, because straight is the gate, and narrow is the way that leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. You know, I was sitting here just a minute ago, and believe it or not, every now and then I have an original thought. And it just dawned on me. I was thinking about this sermon and thinking about, we got to change our mindset. Go into Revelation 3 and 4 and look at the 7 churches of Asia Minor and tell me what's missing there. Now, John is going to talk with these congregations like Sardis, and he says, thou hast a name that thou livest and art dead. You come down to Philadelphia. Thou hast kept my word and hast not denied my name. Laodicea, down in verse 14. I know thy works, that you're cold nor hot, and I would that you were cold nor hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm, I'll spew thee out of my mouth. And you go through and pick out all 7 of these churches that are in Asia Minor. And has it ever dawned on you what's missing there? He rebukes them for doctrinal error. Is that true or false? Ashley, true or false? That's true. Ashley, show me one time in any of the 7 churches that he says, I'm rebuking you because you only have 55 members instead of 60. It's not there. That's our mindset. You know, we could look at Matthew 18 and verse 20, where 2 or 3 are gathered together, there am I in the midst of them. That's what Christ said. See, we get hung up on numbers, and it's an occupational hazard for a preacher, I'll guarantee you, because most times your job depends upon numbers. If numbers go down, they don't ever look at the eldership and say, well, let's get rid of the eldership. No, it's usually numbers went down, we need to change preachers. I can understand that to a certain extent. To a certain extent, I'm willing to take and accept some of the responsibility. I said some. But now, to whom does the rest of the responsibility fall? Isaiah 55 and verse 11 says that my word shall not return unto me void. Christ told his disciples to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. What's different in relationship to that than to you and me? We can talk about crappie fishing. We can talk about bass fishing. We can talk about turkey hunting, deer hunting, quail hunting, squirrel hunting, hunting girls. That's for the teenage boys. The teenage girls hunt boys. We can talk about all those kind of things. But does it ever dawn on us to say to one of our friends, are you a Christian? Are you saved? Would you want to know what Jesus Christ had to say about being saved? And you know, there's really no response that they can give to the first question that shouldn't hesitate you or cause you to hesitate in asking the second. Are you saved? Yes. What'd you do? Tell me what you did to be saved. Did you know that with that second question, you're automatically in a Bible study? Do you know with that second question that you're automatically teaching somebody the gospel of Jesus Christ? Did you know with that second question that you are automatically evangelizing? You, not me, not the elders, not the deacons, not the Sunday school teachers, little old bitty YOU. Don't you think we need to change our mindset? Don't you think it's about time for us to get back to evangelizing the world? Don't you think it's time for us to accept responsibility? We're warming by fires of men in past generations who started these fires. I am so thankful, and I don't say this tongue in cheek. I am so thankful to have grown up right here. I am so thankful to have sat at the feet of Brother Bobby Duncan. I don't know of anybody that was a finer gospel preacher than Bob Duncan was. He could preach the truth. He could quote the Bible. He knew the Bible inside and out. He always gave you a biblical answer for any question you might ask. That was Brother Duncan. That was our privilege. Do you understand that? We ought to be thankful. You got to change our mindset. Don't change the message. The message is still the same. John 3 and verse 16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And I, if I be lifted up, will raise all men unto me. All men will come to Christ. If you will exalt him and glorify him, as we talked about this morning, put him on that cross so that the world can see Christ in you. But they'll not glorify him if they can't see him in you. Number one, you want to get out of the rut, change your mind. Number two, focus on the gospel, not on gimmicks. Gimmicks are not going to save individuals. Gadgets are not going to save individuals. I've preached a lot of sermons with a PowerPoint presentation, but I don't need a PowerPoint presentation to preach the gospel anywhere. For the last 2 or 3 summers, I've been going over into the islands. Nathaniel, what possibility do you have? I guess you could carry a laptop if you had it charged. But you stay out and you knock on doors and you sit down at somebody's house, and you know what still is the best thing in the world? This is it. I'd recommend you have that. Oh me, I don't have a pen. See if I got a pencil to do. You need that, you need a pencil, and you need a piece of paper, and you are in a Bible study that will help teach somebody the gospel and save their souls. There's no gimmick about that. You want to get away from gimmicks, talk about attitudes, talk about love. You know, the Bible, as we look John 3 and verse 16, God so loved the world. How much do we love the world? Are we willing to sacrifice and give of our time? Are we willing to be those individuals that are going to study the Word, to be able to preach the Word, to be able to live the Word? The gospel of Jesus Christ is powerful. Romans 1 and verse 16. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it's the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. That's why Paul told Timothy, preach the word. 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 2. Preach the word, be instant in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine, for the time will come when they'll not endure sound doctrine, but they'll heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. They should be turned away from the truth and turned to the fable. It's time for us to get back to emphasizing 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I declare unto you the gospel which I preached unto you, which also ye have received, wherein you stand, by which also you are saved, if you keep in memory what I've preached unto you, unless ye have believed in vain. For I have delivered unto you, first of all, that which I also received, how that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures. When we preach the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, we're going to convert souls. When we offer them cotton candy and bicycle rides and tricks and this and that and whatever the case might be, you're going to convert somebody to be a cotton candy fanatic. They're going to have a sweet tooth, but they're not going to hunger and thirst after the righteousness of God. They're not going to hunger and thirst after that word, after that truth. And you know, a lot of times, many times, when the cotton candy is gone, so are they. Third place, if we want to get out of this out of this rut, it's time for us to work in the present. And right now, don't live in the past. Now, during the 50s, let's see, I was born in 54, so during the time of the 50s, I didn't really recognize anything. You know, until you get 14 or 15 years old, your brain don't really function properly at all. And so I don't hardly remember anything. But you know, I've heard stories, and I can go to my office and pull books off the shelves and read things to you about how the church grew in the 50s. And how that during the 50s was probably one of the greatest period of time in church history in regards to growth, and how the church was growing, and how people were teaching, and how people were listening and being converted. That doesn't help us at all today. What was done in the 50s was done in the 50s. You know what we need to be concerned about? What's being done right now. Right now. I love the passage that's found in 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 2. Turn over there. 2 Corinthians 6. I actually start back up in about verse 1. 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 1. We then, as workers together with him, beseech you also that ye receive not the grace of God in vain. For he saith, I have heard thee in a time accepted, and in the day of salvation have I succored thee. Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. We can learn from the past, but we can't live in the past. We can hope, possibly predict, guess what the future might hold, but we can't live in the future. We're living right now. Right now. What are we doing in relationship to the church right now? If the church is a tired, lifeless, boring entity, whose fault is it? It's ours. How can we change it? Here's how you change it. I've never heard somebody that just was working, constantly working. And all the time that I'm around Stacy Ferguson, and I'll be with Stacy and Kathy for 3 weeks this year, they're not going to complain. About the only complaint you'll ever hear out of Stacy is there's not enough time in a day to get all the work done that he needs to get done. Yeah, but didn't you hear about, and somebody said so and something was done. He ain't worried about that. He's seeking lost souls. If you want to be happy in God's kingdom, go to work. If you're unhappy in God's kingdom, go to work. If you're unhappy in God's kingdom, I'll be here at my office at 8 o'clock in the morning. Let's go to the hospital. Come on. If you're unhappy in God's kingdom, let's go to work. There's widows and widowers that need to be seen to. Come on. Get here at 8 o'clock in the morning. We'll drink a cup of coffee. We'll laugh. We'll have a wonderful time. We'll go to work and we'll laugh all the time. Why? Because you're busy in God's kingdom. People who are unhappy in God's kingdom are not busy. They're self-centered. They're dwelling on what's bothering them, not in what I can do to help someone else. The last point up here, if you want to get out of this rut, the thing to do is exalt the truth over tradition. I still advocate, and this eldership probably wants to pull out what hair it has left sometimes, but I advocate just mixing things up all the time, actually. Instead of having a song and a prayer and 3 songs, the last time I led singing, I led 3 songs, and then we had a prayer. I thought folks was going to faint. That's just a tradition. It's just a tradition. We're not told when to do it. We're told that we're supposed to sing. Sometimes I wish we had a lot more singing. Singing is one of the most beautiful aspects of worship. I wish we would spend more time around the Lord's table to talk about what these emblems represent. The bread is the unleavened bread is the body. It represents the body of Jesus Christ. The fruit of the vine represents the blood that was shed. Christ did this for you. Do we ever take the time to ask ourselves, what are we doing for Him? We need to exalt the truth. John 8, verse 32, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. I want you to look. You can throw John 17:17 in there as well, where it says, sanctify thy truth, thy word is truth. But then I want you to go over to 3 John. Same writer, 3 John verses 3 and 4. For I rejoice greatly when the brethren came and testified of the truth that is in thee, even as thou walkest in the truth. Now listen to verse 4. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. I'll say this since all my kids are gone tonight. And I love each and every one of them. But what they do physically, you know, if they even became president of the United States, that wouldn't mean as much to me as what John said about his children, spiritually speaking, they walk in truth. They walk in the truth. What are we doing in regards to our life? What are we doing in regards to this? All right, 3 more points. What's the solution? What's the solution? Here's the solution that John offered in the book of Revelation in chapters 3 and verse 4. He said, first of all, we need to examine ourselves to see whether or not we're in the truth. Secondly, he says you need to evaluate your life. James put it this way, that man that looks at a mirror. Now, be honest. I've told you many times before, when I was 18 years old, I looked in that mirror. I was 6'5", I weighed 145 pounds, soaking wet. And mother and daddy and well, not daddy so much, but mother, according to the coaches, tried to fatten me up all the time. And I'd eat and eat and eat and eat, and I never could gain weight. I never could. Well, I'd look in the mirror after I'd eaten those 2 cheeseburgers and all the French fries and chocolate milkshakes enriched with raw eggs right before I go to bed and do sit-ups and push-ups and chin-ups and run miles on miles and miles and all that kind of. I'd look in the mirror and I always saw that guy that was 6'5", 220 pounds. That was a lie. What was staring back at me was still 6'5", 145 pounds, soaking wet. It's time for us to examine our lives to see whether or not we're in the truth. It's time for us to evaluate, be honest. In evaluation, you understand. And in relationship to that, it's also time for us to evangelize, for us to go to work, to get busy in God's kingdom. When you will examine, evaluate, and evangelize, let me tell you something, your life is going to change. Your life is going to be different. Your life is not going to be stuck in a rut. Your life is going to be concerned about helping others. It's going to be seeking the lost. It's going to be caring for those and being compassionate toward those individuals that need our care, our love, and our compassion. Now, if we're stuck in the rut, it's nobody's fault but ours. And if you want to get out of that rut, you can get out of it the same way. If you're not a Christian, become a Christian. Do what the Bible says. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. He that believeth not shall be damned. I tell you nay, except you repent, you shall all likewise perish. Whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess before my Father which is in heaven. Now why tarriest thou? Arise and be baptized and wash away thy sins, calling upon the name of the Lord. Is that what you've done? Well, then have you done that and you sat down and just gotten comfortable